Topping today's news, the Minister of National Security discussing anti-gang laws. We dive into the annual prison report as they continue to make improvements at the facility, the latest on the government's row with the Grand Bahama Port Authority, and the founding father, Dr. Elwood Donaldson, passes away. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Jareno Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News, and it is a pleasure to have you join us. As senseless gang violence continues to rock the nation, particularly in New Providence, Grand Bahama, and seemingly now on Abaco and Eleuthera, officials are trying to place their finger on the pulse of this antisocial behavior in an effort to reduce, if not eradicate, this menace to society. In this next report by Cale Campbell, the Minister of National Security dives a little deeper into the history of gangs here in the Bahamas.
At the office of the Prime Minister's weekly press briefing this morning, Minister of National Security Wayne Monroe went into further detail with regards to the 5-pillar crime plan unveiled earlier in the week by Prime Minister Philip Davis. He begins by clarifying that the plan is not a knee-jerk reaction, but has always been the crime policy of the Davis administration.
And first-generation gangs are just groups of people who aren't really organized and just committing violence and minor crime, no major identified leader. You have second-generation gangs who have criminal operations for profit. So these are the ones that sell drugs, want to try and control areas. And because that is what they're seeking to do, you then have more violence, more shootings. And then you have the third generation gangs that seek to increase and monopolize area, who may be involved with the import of drugs that may then be distributed to second-generation gangs to sell, and also exporting drugs. And they tend to use, with the change in how drug trafficking happens, violence to intimidate people to either sell their drugs or not to sell their competitors' drugs.
He goes into further detail with regards to the Crime Task Force, which he says is a multi-ministry effort.
Looking at more effective anti-gang legislation, inclusive of more effective civil injunction against their assets and more effective forfeiture provisions. Everything that we do has to be tailored to fit our circumstance. And so you can look at the US or Europe and look at their provisions, but they are an income tax regime where you have to declare for income tax, so you know basically what people say their income are. We have no income tax here. You do have national insurance, but that has set with ceilings, and then there are certain realities. So whenever we look at legislation, be it anti-gang in relation to how they identified the financial parts of it, we have to take care to tailor the provisions to fit this country.
He then speaks into detail with regards to resources provided to the Royal Bahamas Police Force.
The starting issue is this: how do you prove someone is in a gang? There are issues about the burden of proof. One of the most vexing things is your relationships are often known by the persons themselves who are in a relationship. So the nature of the Bahamas is this: a bunch of us are related to each other, eh? So if you see us together and acting in concert, are you saying we're a criminal gang? And when you charge us as being a criminal gang, I say, well, that's just my cousin. That's my brother. So the question of burdens of proof, standards of proof, have to be looked at with regard to our particular circumstances.
According to the Minister of National Security, the Davis administration have contributed more to resources for police in 20 months than the previous administration did in 4 years.
The one thing I can tell you is, bearing in mind what I did for a living for 30-something years, I know exactly how you can attack any piece of legislation And by the time we advance, and the Attorney General indicated they're looking at legislation now, by the time you see something tabled in Parliament, the Bahamian public can be guaranteed that Wayne Monroe Casey would have told the Attorney General, everyone, exactly how he would attack the legislation, and so that we can safeguard against any weakness in it. It is pointless to put legislation in place that is not firm and effective.
For JCN News, I'm Cale Campbell.
Whether or not to impose capital punishment remains a national debate amid the ongoing crime crisis. Recently, F&M Member of Parliament for St. Anne's, Adrian White, shared his views and is calling for murderers to be hung. MP White, a reputable attorney, disagrees with the Privy Council's stance that the death penalty should be rare. He believes for murderers, the punishment should be death.
Capital punishment is on our books. It's been a part of our country, and we need to start hanging persons that have been convicted, completed their appeal process of murder again. I'm not into this whole deal about Privy Council saying it needs to be the worst of the worst. That's their opinion. My opinion is if you're found guilty of the offense, and that's the punishment that's connected to that particular type of offense, you need to take that punishment, and for murder, it's death.
Mr. White says he believes the death penalty will act as a deterrent for criminals. The Member of Parliament for St. Anne's also argued that even in cases of crimes of passion, we must focus on the persons whose life was lost. Last week, Wednesday, in the House of Assembly, members met briefly before breaking to attend the annual parliamentary church service. During the brief session, Minister of National Security Wayne Monroe tabled the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services Annual Report 2022. In that report were some intriguing statistics related to inmates, prison officers, and visitors to the prison. The report revealed, among other things, at the prison in 2022, instances of trafficking, inmate brutality, missing funds, disobedience, and missing ammunition. Regarding contraband by inmates, there were over 300 items reported, including cell phones, SIM cards, chargers, shanks, cigars, and makeshift batteries. Additionally, there were 56 reports of alleged misconduct involving prison officers, and the Internal Affairs Unit brought 57 charges against 38 officers to the disciplinary tribunal. 2 correction officers were taken into police custody for alleged rape and attempted shop breaking and burglary. The report also said 573 charges were brought against 369 residents, with the offenses including fighting, using prohibited articles, assault, and disrupting order. According to the report, overall, there was a 3% increase in officers charged and a 65% decrease in inmate charges. In February of last year, the government approved a National Insurance Board rate increase that is expected to take effect July 1st this year, prompting concerns that the labor force would be considerably impacted. Minister of Labor and the Public Service, Pia Glover-Roll, spoke to reporters, revealing that the increase will be minor and informed Bahamians of what to expect.
We know that for years actuaries have said that our national insurance rate would have to increase. Our administration did give notice of this increase a year ago as an opportunity for businesses to prepare, for employers to prepare for what will be, we anticipate, a very small increase, but an increase nonetheless. But this will speak to how employers from a labor perspective shape their workforce.
Unionists have voiced their disapproval of the rate increase, with their main concern being an increase in deductions from employees' salaries. Minister Glover-Roll asserted that her ministry is ensuring that the change in rate does not have this overwhelming impact on the labor force. However, she does predict businesses hiring more part-time workers.
The NBC businesses have said that they are probably opting to go to more part-time workers. We are going to do all we can from the Department of Labor perspective, from a legal and legislative perspective, to ensure that workers aren't disenfranchised no matter what happens. That's what's priority for us at the Department of Labor.
The last and only rate increase in NIB's history was in 2010, when the rate increased from 8.8% to 9.8%. And finally, in this segment, JCN has learned that yet another founding father has passed away. Dr. Elwood Donaldson has died at the age of 86 years old. He was a PLP member of the historic House of Assembly from 1967 to 1972, which ushered in majority rule in January of 1967. He would go on to become one of the Dissident Eight, the nucleus of the Free PLP, which subsequently merged with the UBP to form the now FNM. Many years later, during the first Christie administration, Dr. Donaldson reassociated himself with the PLP and served as non-resident ambassador to UNESCO. With Donaldson's passing, Sir Arthur Folkes and Maurice Moore are now the only members of that 1967 House of Assembly still alive. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back after these commercials.